Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good day and you're safe during this pandemic. My name is Aditya, and I'm one of the representatives at Animal Ethics in India. Uh, for those of you who are not familiar with Animal Ethics, we are an international anti-speciesist advocacy organization, and we primarily focus on outreach about speciesism, wild animal suffering, to create a better world for all sentient beings to live in. So today, on the occasion of World Day for the End of Speciesism, we at Animal Ethics are participating in the activities that are happening across the world by giving this online talk on challenging speciesism and why it is important to reject it. So let me start off with the talk. Let me share my screen. Yep. All right. So this talk will mainly explore what is speciesism. We will explore different forms of speciesism, and we'll also explore some arguments for and against it. And then finally, we will look at what we can do once we reject speciesism and what that entails, what that implies. So to start off with, what is speciesism? So you're all aware of the different kinds of discrimination that occur in the society. Discrimination means whenever someone is treated worse or they're not given full moral consideration or they are treated in a disadvantageous way compared to others for unjustified reasons. Similarly, speciesism is a form of discrimination against those individuals based on their species membership. So just as we would consider the color of a person or the gender of a person to be an arbitrary criteria against discriminating people, similarly, species membership is an arbitrary criteria when we discriminate against non-human animals. So it is a very common belief in the society where the speciesist attitudes are very widespread and very few people question it. And it is prevalent across different societies, and it varies from region to region, like the forms of speciesism where certain non-human animals are given moral consideration, but the others aren't. So let's look at different forms of speciesism and how they affect us. Again, one more thing that I wanted to mention is what do we mean by moral consideration? So to consider someone morally, it means to take into account how they are affected by our actions, by our attitudes, or by our behavior towards them. So the consequences that our attitudes and behavior have on their well-being, that is what means moral consideration. So let's look at some forms of speciesism. One of the most widely held forms of speciesism is called as anthropocentrism, which is the view that the interests of humans count more than equally strong interests of the other animals. This is a belief where people feel justified to exploit and harm animals for the benefit of humans, no matter how small the benefit is. For example, even if the animal is suffering a lot because of an action, people who believe in anthropocentrism would justify it because it results in a small benefit for themselves. So this is one of the most widely held forms of speciesism, where we disregard their interests and we only consider the interests of individuals belonging to the human species. And it's not just, and speciesism is just not a discrimination which involves separating humans from non-human animals. There's also discrimination involved between two different forms of species, two different species. It could be based on different criteria. For example, based on aesthetic preferences, where animals that we find aesthetically pleasing and valuable, we believe them to be deserving of moral consideration, whereas those that we don't find aesthetically valuable, we justify harming them. For example, pandas, we find them to be cute and they are usually adored in different parts of the world. So they are given moral consideration, whereas an individual belonging to a species of rats or pig are usually considered disgusting in some societies. So they are not given moral consideration. Another form of speciesism is based on the scientific interest towards that particular species. To give you an example, based on conservationism, where academics and scientists find certain species valuable, which are scientifically valuable. If, for example, they are endangered, or if they are a crucial species for the stable functioning of an ecosystem, these species are given much more consideration as opposed to species that are not considered scientifically interesting, like invasive species, for example, where their interests are disregarded and then they are killed in harmful ways. Another less talked about form of speciesism is based on the size of the species. A lot of us are psychologically disposed to consider species that are larger in size because they are more relatable to humans based on their size, and the animals that are much smaller, like for example invertebrates, which are much more numerous in the wild, their interests are disregarded because we find it hard to relate with their interests, and they are very rarely taken into consideration. So let us look at some of the arguments which people who believe in anthropocentrism use to defend speciesism. The narrative goes like that only humans should be respected simply because we possess the sophisticated intellectual capacities and the cognitive capacities which allows us to engage in very complex behavior. And a lot of non-human animals, most non-human animals do not possess any intellectual or cognitive capacities comparable to that of most humans. Hence, it's okay to disregard them. A second argument that they give is that since we share a special relationship of solidarity or sympathy with other humans, only human beings should be included in the moral circle, and non-human animals can be disregarded because we do not have any special relationship with them. And the third argument is based on might, which is that since we are more powerful, we share a power relationship with the other non-human animals. We are technologically superior. We have the powers to oppress them. Hence, it's okay to oppress them. It's just based on the fact that it is possible for us to oppress them. Hence, it is okay for us to oppress them. So these are some of the three most common arguments that are used by the defenders of speciesism to justify harming animals. Now, let us look at why these arguments are unjustified and they don't hold up under scrutiny. So I'll present to you an argument against speciesism, which can debunk the three arguments which were laid out earlier. And this is called as the argument from species overlap. So the usual misconception among the defenders of speciesism is that there is this boundary which separates humans from the rest of non-human animals. That is, we have some special capacity which separates us, distinguishes us from the rest of non-human animals. But that's not really true. And as I mentioned, they usually claim that we possess the intellectual capacities, we have the special relationships, we are more powerful, hence we are a class apart from the rest of the non-human animals. But that's not really the case. There are many sections of human beings who are also not as intellectually sophisticated, who are not as powerful as the rest of the adult humans, and whom we don't share a special relationship with. For example, babies or cognitively disabled people, they are not intellectually sophisticated. Similarly, when we talk about special relationship, we also don't share special relationship with people from the other countries. This argument is usually used by racists, for example, to justify discriminating against individuals of other race by claiming that since we don't share any special relationship with them, it's fine to disregard their interests. However, this has been widely rejected by the modern society, where we deem these sorts of discrimination as unjustified and we reject them. And also discriminating based on power. For example, when humans were enslaved by another section of human beings, we completely consider that as abhorrent, and we would not partake in such relationships where when one individual is more powerful than the other, we justify the harm that that person causes to the oppressed person. So since we would not accept these arguments as, as justified reasons for when we are discriminating against human beings, it also implies that we need to extend the same, we need to be consistent and extend the same reasoning for the non-human animals. Uh, for example, in recent studies, it's been proven that a pig has similar IQ to that of a 3-year-old child, but we would never treat a child the way we exploit and treat a pig. So these reasons are not relevant, they are not justified, and the only thing that matters when we are deciding which individual to give moral consideration to, the only thing that matters is if the being has the capacity to be harmed or benefited, which is where sentience comes into the picture, which is the only relevant property for deserving moral consideration. To keep in mind, there are people who also extend moral consideration to non-sentient uh, objects, for example, ecosystem or species. However, generally, people extend moral consideration to beings that can be benefited or harmed, which is to sentient beings. Sentience, again, is the capacity to have positive and negative experiences. It is where a being is conscious and can experience pain, suffering, pleasure, and have these experiences in a conscious way. So a lot of non-human animals are sentient. In fact, in 2012, there was a conference where there was an agreement signed called the Cambridge Declaration of Consciousness, where a lot of prominent scientists and cognitive neuroscientists came together to sign this agreement, where they stated that humans are not unique in possessing consciousness. And a lot of non-human animals like birds and mammals are conscious, and even a lot of invertebrates have the neurological substrates required for consciousness. And this conclusion is usually based on two major criteria. One is the behavior, that is, if the animal acts in a way where it repels from the negative stimuli and is attracted towards positive stimuli, and also the physiology, that is, if a being possesses the physiological structures necessary to have sentience. And when I talk about physiological structures, we mammals and birds, we have central nervous system, and there's a centralization that occurs in the brain, which is the most crucial part when we are looking to identify the structures necessary for sentience. Based on the existing research, it's been determined that the centralization is necessary for a being to have complex conscious experiences. Yeah, so birds and mammals, humans, cows, we all possess central nervous system where the information is processed and it's processed in the brain. So that is where consciousness or sentience arises. And it's not just beings with central nervous system. Other beings, beings which do not possess central nervous system, but which have homologous structures like ganglia, which function similarly to that of a central nervous system. For example, crustaceans like lobsters, they possess ganglia, and there's also a centralization involved with the ganglia and the neurons, which allows them to process the information and have conscious experiences. And lobsters do show the behavior required, for example, escaping from threats or being attracted to shells, which they leave for months on end when they are when they encounter a predator, they come back to that shell and they are attracted to that shell. So they do have the positive and negative aspects of the behavior where they escape from negative stimuli and are attracted to positive stimuli, and they also possess the physiological structures. Similarly, it's not just the larger animals, even invertebrates do have the structures necessary to have sentience. For example, a honeybee, they have ganglia and they have a brain as well, and they also show very complex behavior. For example, the very famous waggle dance, where they communicate with the rest of the hive, the direction and the distance from the flower patch, the food source. So they rotate a particular number of times to show the rest of the hive that the food is in that direction and that distance apart. So the scientists have observed this behavior and they've been able to ascertain that the number of times they rotate around correlates with the distance from the food source. So it's not just the larger beings, but also a lot of invertebrates. However, research is still going on into what the experiences of the invertebrates are and how they experience pain and suffering. But it is likely that they are sentient because they do satisfy the two criteria that I mentioned earlier. And it's not just the biological beings. It is very much possible that in the future, humans design an artificial entity which does exhibit the behavior of being sentient and also has the physiological structures necessary to functionally process information and to experience things consciously. So if they turn out to be sentient, and if we have enough evidence that robots, for example, are sentient, then it makes sense to also extend moral consideration to them and consider their interests as well. So this was just a brief about why sentience is the morally relevant property and that a lot of non-human animals are sentient. Now let us look at why this was necessary and how humans treat animals. Let us look at the attitude of what the attitude of speciesism causes to non-human animals. As we all know, non-human animals are terribly exploited by humans for a number of purposes. It's estimated that more than 80 billion mammals and birds are killed every single year. And if we consider aquatic animals, it's estimated that the number of fishes that are killed by humans extends to 2 trillion of them. And if we also consider the invertebrates that are killed by humans, the number is much, much higher, with several trillion invertebrates being killed in the industries where they are used. For example, honey, silk, for the color, and for the rest of the pharmaceutical industry, etc. So we can only imagine the scale of the suffering that is there by humans exploiting the non-human animals for our benefit. Let us look at some scenarios in which, or some ways in which humans harm the non-human animals. Fishing industry is one of the largest growing industry. It's growing significantly every year, and this is responsible for causing one of the most amount of suffering. Fishes are sentient. They do show the behavior necessary, behavior exhibiting that they do feel fear, they do feel suffering, and they also possess the physiological structures to feel pain and suffering. So they do suffer, and more than 2 to 3 trillion fishes. And there is less certainty about the number of individuals that are affected by the fishing industry because they are usually weighed by tons. So it's difficult to get an estimate about the exact number of individuals that are harmed, but it's estimated that 2 to 3 trillion fishes are harmed. And this number is very, very huge. And the fishes are killed in horrible ways. They are usually dragged out of the water, they are impaled, and they usually die of asphyxiation and suffocation, which is a very painful way to die. And they are also cramped together in these nets, which is very stressful for them, and they die of the weight of the fishes on the top. And so we can only imagine the amount of suffering that they undergo when they are being fished out. Similarly, pigs as well. In the pork industry, since the industry optimizes for profit, there is very less concern given for the well-being of animals. However, many countries are outlawing the cruel practices. For example, this practice is of gestation crates. To give you an estimate, over 300 million pigs are killed every single year in United States alone. And if we also consider the other countries, for example, China is responsible for supplying the pork of half of the production of pork happens in China. So the production of these animal products are growing very fast, and this structures which you see here are called as gestation crates, where pigs are trapped inside these structures, where it's called as a gestation crate, as I mentioned. So they do not have space to adequately move around, exhibit their natural behavior, and they're usually put inside these crates for 16 weeks. And once they deliver babies, they are transferred into farrowing crates, where they are allowed to nurse their young for a few weeks. But again, this is a very stressful way for them. They usually live their life full of suffering, where they are trapped inside and they are very stressed. And they are, again, once they lay babies and they are of particular weight, they are transported to slaughterhouse and they are killed in very painful ways inside the gas chambers, where they are suffocated to death. Another species which is very widely exploited by humans are the hens, and they are one of the most widely exploited individuals, with close to 50 billion hens farmed and killed every single year. And yeah, this what you see in the photo here is of the layer hens, where And they're put inside these very tiny cages called as battery cages, where they only occupy a space of an A4 size paper, and they are not able to move around, flap their wings. And this is very common. This is the standard practice in the factory farms where hens are farmed, where they don't have space to move around, and they get so stressed that they start pecking at each other and cannibalizing each other. So the industry usually resorts to debeaking, where they cut off the beaks of the hens. And again, they also don't get access to sunlight, sufficient sunlight, or adequate amount of food. There's always competition among the hens that are cramped inside these cages. So yeah, even if they get sick or if they die, they're not usually given the necessary care for their treatment, because there's so many hens, and it is almost impossible for the farmer to give them adequate care. So the only time they are taken out of the cage is when they are being transported to be sent to slaughterhouse. And this is the standard practice. And we can only imagine the amount of suffering and agony that they go through. Another less known fact about the poultry industry is that the day-old male chicks, since they are not productive, they don't lay eggs, they are considered disposable, and they are killed because raising them would be costly for the industry. So they are dumped inside these sacks, and they are either burnt, they are asphyxiated to death, or they are thrown into the trash. And most of these small chicks, they either die due to the weight, or they die due to asphyxiation or drowning. And the number of chicks that are killed, after every hatching of the eggs is very, very high. And then they're ground up and then they're sent to the pet food industry. So this industry has its roots into different industries. And usually people assume that if they stop consuming meat, that is enough, and they have stopped contributing to animal exploitation. But that's not really true. Humans, even though we do not harm and kill an animal, we still use them in very cruel ways. For example, dairy industry is another very, very cruel industry. For the production of milk, a cow or a buffalo usually only gives milk when they are pregnant. And to make them pregnant, humans usually artificially inseminate these individuals to give birth. And once they give birth and once they start lactating, because we want that milk for the other human beings, we separate the calf, and this happens everywhere. And we separate the calf from the mother, and we isolate it from the maternal nourishment, which a mother cow would usually give to a calf. And this is observable when a calf usually cries out in pain for many days, and it cries out for its mother. And these calves are usually fed milk replacers. And only for the first 2 days, these calves are allowed to be nursed by their mother when the colostrum is being supplied to the calves. But later they are put inside these structures, and they're separated from their mother. And usually if the calves are male, they are either sent to the veal or the beef industry. And again, they are just being raised for profits, and they're being treated as commodities. Their well-being is only given attention as far as it is profitable to the industry. And once the cow stops producing milk, she is usually sent to the slaughterhouse. So this is a standard practice, and it happens across the world, where we steal the milk of the calves and we put them through enormous amount of suffering. And this was just a small brief that I gave you of the different ways in which humans exploit the non-human animals. And it's very, very sad. And however, there is hope, because there is awareness growing about speciesism. But we at Animal Ethics, we strongly advocate against speciesism, and we are here outlining the changes which we feel are necessary to liberate animals from this form of oppression that they are being put through by humans. First is to end their current legal status as property, because as long as they are being treated as property, their interests would never be taken seriously into consideration. The benefits and harms that they undergo would never be given importance. So it's very, very important to come out of this commodified status of non-human animals, and to look at them as sentient beings who are capable of experiencing pleasure, pain, and suffering, just as we would for any human being. So it's very important to grant personhood to non-human animals and to recognize their sentience, to move on to a world which is more anti-speciesist. Again, one of the reasons why speciesism is so widely held is because since our childhood, through our education system and through the social values, we are taught that it's okay to discriminate against non-human animals and that their interests don't matter as much as humans and that we don't need to extend moral consideration to them. So the foundational root of it lies in education, and education is the solution. So we propose education as a tool to educate people about anti-speciesism and why it is important to reject speciesism and to recognize the interests of non-human animals. And the third reason why people are reluctant to move away from speciesist attitudes is because of humans usually consuming products that come from animal exploitation, whether it is cosmetics, whether it is for food, clothing, entertainment. It's so ingrained into our society that we don't question the harm that the animals undergo for that service which we are utilizing. So it is very important to find replacements for the practices where we exploit non-human animals. For example, adopting plant-based protein or cultured meat as an alternative to animal-based protein. Similarly, the methods where we test on animals for pharmaceutical, vaccines, cosmetics, etc. There are alternatives available. So it is very important to adopt these alternatives where no non-human animals are harmed. Similarly, for clothing as well, instead of the skin of non-human animals, we have many more synthetic as well as natural alternatives that are available, which don't involve causing animals harm. So we lay these three major means of creating the changes to move towards an anti-speciesist world. And this is what we propose to stop the harm that humans cause to non-human animals. But as I said, speciesism does not only mean rejecting harming animals actively, but also being actively in favor of helping them whenever possible. If, for example, a human is suffering due to a cause that is not human caused, it's a natural cause. If he's in the wild, if he's stuck in the wild, or if he's affected by a natural disaster, we consider it our duty to help him. If we are being fair, we consider it our duty to help him and to offer him assistance. Similarly, even if animals are being harmed by anthropogenic reasons or due to natural reasons, if we reject speciesism, then it entails that we should also grant moral consideration to them when they are in the wild and to give them assistance when they are suffering. So to talk about this issue, I would like to invite one of the interns of animal ethics, Priyanka, to speak about this issue. And Priyanka, I would like to hand it over to you now.
So thank you, Aditya. Thank you for having me here. So today I'll be giving a brief introduction about wild animal suffering. So let me start off with my part. Let me start off this with a statement that animals in the wild suffer a lot. They suffer a lot in the wild, and this is the fact that is most ignored by people. So the most of the people have an idea in their mind that the best thing we can do for wild animal, is to leave them alone on their own. It doesn't matter whether they are suffering or they are happy or they are in pain. They usually say that we should not interfere with nature. We should leave them on their own, but that's just not fair. We humans do intervene in nature to harm and exploit animals. When we can do that, we can also help them. We can also help them in the situation where they are in pain. So usually people think that we instead of here. So first in this slide, we can see a moose is being held by rescuers and activists, which is stuck in ice lake. So yeah, marine animals like dolphins, whales, and sharks often get disoriented from the shore and get stranded on the beach. So in this case, we can see how rescuers and activists are helping the animals to get back to deep water, saving their life. Offsprings of animals often get abandoned or orphaned by their parents who cannot take care of them or died. So in this case, rescuers and activists help them by taking care of them and treating them in wild animal rescue centers and treatment centers. Yeah, in this image, we see a turtle which is suffering from crushing injury. So in this case, we can help them by taking them to treatment center and taking care of it. Okay, so most of us think that there are no wild animals in urban area, but that is just not the case. There are like many animals in the urban area like squirrel, crow, pigeon, snakes, and they do suffer from accidents and other harms. So yeah, so we can help them by taking them to hospital or wild animal rescue centers or by fostering them. Okay. Not only to the individual animals, we can also help animals on a large scale in the wild. For example, in this case, you can see the deers are being fed by people who are like fed by the people in the case of hardships, like times of hardship. Like such mass feeding programs are really beneficial for animals during the times of hardship when they have no access to food in the cases like famine or drought or harsh weather conditions like extreme cold. Okay, yeah, we humans do encourage, we humans are often doing vaccination programs to eradicate zoonotic diseases like anthrax, tuberculosis, and rabies. So in these cases, we see over here that the reason for these kind of programs is anthropocentric. Though the reason is anthropocentric, but it is benefiting animals too. So the process of the vaccination program goes like the vaccine is injected into bait or cookies, which is dropped off from helicopter over a wild area, and when the animals consumes it, they are vaccinated against the particular disease. So such programs are really beneficial for animals, and we must like support and encourage such programs by government or like private sectors. Then yeah, of course, let us now talk about a widespread misconception that the life in the wild is idyllic. The animals in the wild are happy and are living in harmony with the nature. So but this is not true. This is just not the case. The actual scenario is quite different and sometimes horrible too. We see over here that animals suffer from like they experience pain due to starvation, thirst, hunger, conflicts, accidents, and much more stressful situations. So we must remove this misconception that the animals are happy in wild. We must not intervene in nature, but actually we should extend our hand to help them. In this case, we can see due to the harsh weather condition like extreme heat or extreme cold, animals suffer a lot in the wild. In this case, we can see a deer is stuck in ice. It is frozen in the ice where it have no access to food or warmth. So it is it is soon going to die. And if it is not going to die, the case will be even worse when they have like no access to food or these things. They have no medical assistance. It is going to suffer from horrible conditions like frostbite and other complications. Then yeah, of course, diseases, parasitism, and infections are some of the very common and painful ways for wild animals to suffer. So here in this image, we see an amphibian is being infected by an aquatic fungal disease known as chytridiomycosis, where this fungus is going to cover the skin of the host and affect the metabolism of the host. As we all know that most of the amphibians uses their skin to respire. Here the host is slowly going to suffocate to the death. Natural disaster like flood, drought, earthquake, volcano, these are some of the natural disasters that causes a lot harm to animals in the wild and deaths. This image is taken from Kaziranga National Park, where a large number of animals die and get injured during annual floods. In 2019, it was estimated that around 400 to 600 animals died in the flood. So in these situations, we are not considering smaller animals and invertebrates. If we start including them also in the count, the number is going to be really high. Hatchlings often fall off from the trees and die on the ground when they are trying to fly or due to the storm. So in this case, they die easily. And when they do not die, the situation is even worse for them. They suffer for days on the ground and slowly, they later on die due to starvation, predation, or due to their injuries. So in this case, we see that the existence of this individual is very short, but is full of pain. All this individual has experienced is just pain and agony. Okay, So another natural reason for why this the prevalent amount of suffering in the wild is the life history. So most of us are not aware of what life history is. So let me talk about life history first. So life history of an animal are some of the events and patterns that occurs at a certain age of the animal's life. Um, that are related to reproduction strategy or and their survival. I'll give you some example of life history patterns. For example, the age at which the animals start reproducing, then the reproduction strategy they follow, and the amount of parental care they give to their offsprings, the age at which they die, and the number of and the size of offsprings they produce. So due to the high mortality rate of offsprings or due to less or no parental care of the offsprings, the most common reproduction strategy that wild animals follow in the wild is producing a large number of offsprings at a time. So in this case, we can see a bullfrog lays up to 10,000 eggs at a time, out of which a very few individuals survive to their adulthood. Most of the tadpoles die due to starvation or predation by other animals, or due to the water they are surviving in ending up drying. Okay. Turtles lays roughly 600 eggs during their lifetime, but most of them dies due to getting disoriented to roads and other dangerous places, or due to starvation or predation by hawk and other animals. So here we see, given all the reasons, we see that the amount of suffering in the wild is really high. So now we all might think that this is an impossible task to deal with or to be solved, but it's not true. We can help, we can do a lot about the issue. So we at Animal Ethics are trying to create awareness about the issue and about the importance of this issue. We are doing this in a number of ways. Firstly, we have created an extensive source of details available on our website that is available for the public. This information on our website is available for all the general public and activists, which is usually not available or inaccessible to public. Then the second barrier for this information to reach out to public is the language. Because of this reason, we are focusing on translating our whole website in different languages like Mandarin, Hindi, and many more. Till now, we have translated our website in more than 8 languages, and we are still working on more languages. Then in order to make it more engaging and interesting, we have our online video courses regarding the topic, which covers each and every topic in much more depth. So our online video courses includes images and videos to make it more interesting for viewers and for their better understanding. So we have gotten good feedback about our online video courses. So I highly recommend you all to go through it once at least. We also conduct talks and outreaches talking about speciesism and other issues like wild animal suffering, because it is really important to understand about speciesism and the discrimination that we possess on animals. Here we create awareness and educate people about how important it is to reject speciesism. We deliver talks in universities and colleges also, because this is an issue which is very neglected and very less concerned among academia. So we are trying to promote interest in this area for the students and scientists to work on this area and create awareness among the public about the suffering of wild animals. Recently, we have started giving talks in India too. We are giving talks, especially mainly among students of life sciences, where we are trying to create awareness among students, because this is something which is very neglected in our education system. So We are also focusing on, like, we are also encouraging research. We are also encouraging research in the field of wild animals self suffering and welfare by providing support and funding. So we have also recently published a research focused on a new field of study known as welfare biology. Then we are also working on many, like, we are also funding and providing support to multiple researchers that are focusing on the situation of wild animals. So, for example, recently a study on the situation of wild animals in the forest fire and how to help them was published at the University of Madrid, Spain. We are also currently working on more of such projects. One among them is a blueprint for brucellosis vaccination program for bisons at Yellowstone National Park. Yeah. So if you people liked it, want to learn more or join us, please do reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to welcome you people, and thank you for attending the talk today. Now we'll move upon to the question and answer session. Please type down your doubts and queries in the comment box. We'll be trying to answer you. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka. So I think now we can wait for the questions. If anyone has any questions or thoughts that you would like to clarify, please feel free to write them down in the live chat. We see one question here, which is that, can I watch it on YouTube after the fact? Yeah, we are making this talk available on YouTube, and it will be available so that you can watch it later. So yeah, there'll be a recording of the talk. If anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. We'll give you a couple minutes to ask your questions. All right. Looks like we have no questions right now. Yeah, if you do have any doubts or if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, comment on the video, and or you can reach out to us on Facebook as well. And as Priyanka mentioned, if you're interested in volunteering with Animal Ethics or donating to us, we'd be more than happy to accept your support. And please feel free to reach out to us on Facebook. You will find our email ID on the website as well. So we are very happy to discuss with you about how you can contribute to this goal. And yeah, with that, we would like to thank you so much for attending the talk. And we really hope that you found this interesting, and please share it with other people as well. And we also hope that you are on board with rejecting speciesism, and please share this message about anti-speciesism with your friends and family so that we can increase the size and the impact of this movement. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you.